Hi everyone, welcome to Deep Geek Live. This is episode 4 of our Westworld Pre-Show live streams. It's great to be here. We're going to be looking back at episode 3 and we're going to be looking forward to episode 4. So first of all, let's just introduce my guest today. First of all, let's go to Hax Dogma. Hax, do you want to say hi?
Hey everybody, my name is Hax Dogma. I make Westworld videos. You can find me at Hax Dogma on YouTube or Twitter. And yeah, that's who I am.
Fantastic. And my other guest today is my longtime collaborator on all things Westworld, the wonderful and redoubtable Justin Thomas. Justin, do you want to say hi?
I just want to say thanks for having me again. Always look forward to these, and I think it's going to be a great discussion. Looking forward to the episode. And of course, you can find me at Justin Thomas Show on YouTube and also Twitter and everything else.
Fantastic. And thanks, Jeff, in the chat for noticing my haircut. Yes, it is now heading towards summer in the UK, and it was time for a little bit of a trim. Okay, guys, so we are going to be looking, first of all, I think, at episode 3, just wrapping up a few of the things. There have been a lot of theories about what's going on in episode 3, so we'll just sort of take our way through that so we're all on the same page before starting to look at episode 4. As usual, if there are any questions, put them in the chat. We'll try to get to as many of them as possible. If you've got any super chats, obviously we'll come to them straight away, but let's just start by thinking about episode 3 and what we learned, because there were a lot of new things going on. First of all, I don't know, maybe Justin, if you want to pick up on this, just run us through the Raj or Raj World or whatever it's called. We had a completely new park introduced to us at the start of this episode. What did we learn?
Well, we learned that there is a completely new park, Park 6, which they had dropped some hints on through their always clever and intense viral marketing campaign. But the Raj refers to the, British imperial rule of most of southeastern and India, and Asia, and as well as India and Bangladesh. And so on. It went on, I believe, from about 1858 to 1947, somewhere around there. So this is the, peak of the imperial British rule. This is a park that allows you to do what we would consider trophy hunting now of Bengal tigers and stuff like that. But we did also learn, and it is confirmed when you go to the website for the Raj, which, again, they didn't name that park. So it would be quite easy to say. A lot of us would probably call it Raj World. I think they want to throw us off a lot. But yeah, the Raj allows you to hunt Bengal tigers in game that is extinct. So we do learn that these animals are extinct. So that tells us a little bit about the outside world in 2052 or 54, whichever one it lies on with a Nolan timeline. But I think the bigger reveal here is that I think it was almost just they dropped a new park on us, but it was the backdrop to the introduction of Grace. And that's what I found very interesting about this, is I'm very intrigued with Grace, about how she is obviously intent on not just experiencing the park. She is aware of how you're supposed to experience it. She is looking into the park. She's trying to figure something out. She is on a MIB-like trail. So what does that tell us? There's a lot of theories going around about who she can be. They're all very exciting for me, at least, because I think almost all of them actually add to the narrative. So I don't play the who's this and somebody has to be somebody else for the show to be interesting, but I'm playing it with Grace. So I'm all in. I don't know if you have anything to add about the Raj, except for we did see also a park boundary for the first time, I believe, with it as well. But I don't think it was so much about, the Raj, again, Raj World, whatever. I think we'll probably just start calling it, but I think it was more about Grace. But it's definitely an interesting way to have a little bit more of an idea of what's going on in the outside real world.
Absolutely. And Hax, I'll come to you in just one moment about Grace, because I agree she was the central point here. But I just want to mention a couple of things which we took on board, but it's worth just pausing to note. The first is that there is very clearly an implication here that the worlds, or at least those two parks, are, if not next door to each other, then close by, because she jumped into the river, and the tiger went into the river, and they ended up washed up on Westworld. So if they are next to each other, then that seems to imply that the other worlds might also be, the other parks might also be on this same island. So that's the first thing to be aware of. The second thing is the fact that the revolution, or the hosts going off their narratives, didn't just happen in Westworld. It happened in the other parks as well. Now, we've only just seen this in the Raj, but presumably the other 4 parks, the same thing happened. So we have to now have this thought in our mind: maybe there are other Doloreses, maybe there are other Maeves or Bernards. We simply do not know. But as promised, this season is about panning out and seeing a lot more about what's going on in the parks and in the wider world. But Hax, perhaps you could pick up on the introduction of Grace. There's lots of theories about who she is, but what do we know, and what does that imply about who she is and what she wants?
Yeah, so Grace essentially is an unknown character to us. Even the name Grace comes from an IMDb page. In the show, it's never addressed. Like the man, we know his name Nicholas, but Nicholas never goes and says, "Hey, Grace," or anything of the sort. So an external source is what we're saying is this character, and that's really telling about who she could be. If you think back to season 1, the most revealing thing about the Man in Black is that he was called the Man in Black everywhere, such as the IMDb page. So I believe, and a video that I posted recently cites more evidence for this, but I believe that she's potentially Emily, William's daughter, and that brings a whole surge of theories and how that could go into the storyline and how it could affect each journey that we're seeing with William or with Dolores, and just the interpersonal relationship and the drama that we're going to see in this season. And I think it's so important, and it was probably the shortest part of the episode. It
was, and the interesting thing, there's lots of theories about who she is, because she has a lot of mannerisms of Teresa, the character who died in season 1, but she's also clearly, she knows about that there's something more to these parks than meets the eye. So it implies that she's some sort of insider in some way. It implies that she's trying to head towards a secret Delos base of some kind. She's not just there for being in the park. And if she's been there before, then she's either ridiculously rich or has some kind of free pass to get in. So there's definitely a backstory there that we will learn at some point, I suspect. I see. So Hax, you suggested that she might be Emily, who was the Man in Black's daughter. Just before we move off of Grace, because I think we will see more of Grace, if not this next episode, then certainly in the episodes to come, because her story is not finished. But Justin, did you have any thoughts on who she might be?
Yeah, obviously, me and Hex both have our theory videos that have a lot in common, and I am more leading towards, yes, she is the Man in Black's daughter. I find her very intriguing because she can be an investigative journalist, and that can be just as exciting for the narrative, because I think it's really important that we would have a third party looking into Delos, other than, we just have Delos right now, and then we have, Delos Destinations and the host. But if you put in, let's say, like a third party that is looking into the park, maybe for the ethical issues, or maybe to steal its intellectual property, which isn't as intriguing. But I really like the family connection, because if the Man in Black drove his wife to suicide, which the daughter, clearly states from the quotes we have from season 1, because of who he became in this park, you would have to figure that the daughter that he left behind would be going to Westworld for a lot of the same reasons he went there, but she'd be going there to find out why. She'd want to understand. So it works on so many levels, because she's definitely just not there for the time. They get off those elephants, and Nick says, oh, when the hosts aren't there, they're not, he's like, maybe they're switching it up. She's like, no, that's not how this works. So she's not just like, oh, this is fun, it's different. She's just paying attention to what's happening. She's like, no, this is not how this works. Like, she's not there to have fun. She's there to learn something. And why does she want to learn it? could be the investigative journalist side. It's more intriguing to me that she is the Man in Black's daughter because she wants to understand the park. Maybe she does want to take it down. You kind of mix those two. There's no reason why the Man in Black's daughter couldn't be, an investigative journalist. And it's too, he finally has this game with stakes, right? He finally has this park where the actions matter, and the hosts have a equal shot. And let's give him real stakes. I see the merging of the Raj world, of the merging of both of his worlds, the one that he has rejected. What type of guy says that in season 1 that the real world doesn't, nothing means anything. Things matter only in Westworld. It's like, well, your wife and your daughter reside in the real world. So I think to really mend his worlds, in the first cold open for Reunion, the episode before, we met Emily. Then next episode, we meet Grace. And again, like Hack said, it's only listed on IMDb as Grace. She's never been referred to as that. And it also goes along with the alias MIB. So I'm intrigued with really any way you go with it, except for the Charlotte or the Teresa angle. I mean, yeah, they both smoke cigarettes. But I don't know. I don't like that. That's about it for that. Yeah.
And also with that, Alex pointed out in the chat that she also gave an interview last year, I believe, that her character's name was Grace, and that was pretty much all she could tell us. Something I do want to bring up before we move past this, though, is, and I only thought about this now, but the fact that Park 6 and Park 1 are next to each other, assumingly next to each other, and that she didn't float down river or something like that, means that this island probably looks like some circular island with Parks 1 through 6, and I don't know how to describe it. I mean, the map we have is a circle, of course, but if 1 and 6 are next to each other for whatever reason, then it probably is the full circle. And we're at the end of this entire series, we're going to get an overview of every biome being shown.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point. So the implication there is that Park 1 is sandwiched between Park 6, the Raj, and Park 2, which we assume is Shogun World, and that kind of makes sense in terms of which worlds we get contact with through this season. So it's Parks 3, 4, and 5 that we might not see until later on. I just before we leave this, I would just flag up 2 quick points. The first one is the name. And we are starting to see that the names of characters are actually becoming quite important here. So obviously we have Teddy Flood, and we saw him with the what looks like a flood, dead in what looks like a flood. Armistice, I suspect, is a name which is planted well in advance of a role that she will have. Grace is a very laden name. It means sort of undeserved blessings or undeserved gifts or something along those lines. And so I do wonder whether that's a hint as to what her role might be going forward. But the other thing I just saw in the chat, Kelly Zahara, hi Kelly, good to see you, said that she hopes that actually she's not a character that we already know, that this isn't a closed world with a limited number of characters. I actually quite like that idea. Yes, it would be lovely for her to be tied into somebody. It would add to the stakes with the Man in Black if she ends up in the same place as him later on in the season. But when we get to, for example, the Star Wars analogy, and spoiler warning if you're not caught up in Star Wars, but the idea of Rey's parents actually being nobodies. They weren't Skywalkers or any of these majestic families. She was just a nobody. For me, that actually adds to the universe rather than takes away from it. I think that just making everybody connected makes quite a small world. And I think in the real world, there are lots more interesting people and families than you can just put on a screen at any one time. But if we move on to the end of that little segment, we find that she washes up, she and the tiger, and obviously the tiger has implications for Bernard's story that perhaps we'll talk about later, but she ends up washed up in Westworld, it would appear, looks up, and there's the Ghost Nation. Now, I think, Hax, I'll come to you first on this one, but it's clear that the Ghost Nation are going to play a bigger part this season than they did last season, and it appears that they are trying to gather together certain people. And so the question is, who are they trying to gather together and why? Now, the people that we know they've been going for, we know at the end of last season they captured Stubbs. He seems to have been released this season. but he was definitely there. This season, we've seen them try to get hold of Lee Sizemore, and now they seem to have found Grace. And also in one of the promo pictures, or perhaps I think it was just a still from the trailer, we see the host nation apparently leading a whole load of people down a trail. So they seem to be trying to gather certain people, all humans as far as we know. But why? What are they up to? So Hax, what are your thoughts on what the Ghost Nation are up to in this season?
Yeah, so I fully believe that when Ford went forth and decided that, you know, these are beings that are able to practice free will and in a sense be conscious, and for them to fully be conscious and released and not to be a slave to anybody else, thus being in this park, that they would have to go through this revolution. They would have to be able to overthrow the powers that be and set themselves free in a sense. So I think that Ford didn't believe that all humans should die. So he took out people like Stubbs, who, if he was acting in that role, you know, from what we see, Stubbs is just a good guy doing his job. So Ford, I believe, went forth and said, hey, you know, I mean, he probably didn't have this conversation, but had the Ghost Nation take him out and secure him somewhere else off screen, that we're probably going to find out soon, so that they could have this revolution without someone who's just a good guy doing his job perishing in the process. And I also believe that a similar thing works with Elsie, and I think we're going to find that soon. But yeah, so with the Ghost Nation, ultimately, I think are just a tool to secure humans in the time being. And I think the purpose of that, like overall storytelling, is that we're probably going to see some kind of faction clash here with, you know, this group trying to rescue humans and Dolores trying to obliterate everything in its path. I think that there's going to be maybe some battles between them, or potentially Elsie trying to stop the conflict altogether, or maybe side with you know, the humans to shut down Dolores or stand in the way or something like that. But yeah.
Justin, did you have any thoughts on the Ghost Nation?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, in the past, I've always just kind of had to assume that they are, you know, more in line with what Hax just said, because it makes sense that they are almost just a tool used by Ford to assure the, you know, survival of, because again, he wasn't trying to wipe out humanity, to have, you know, certain humans taken out of the mix, because, you know, just like let's do a Game of Thrones reference, like Kingsguard doing their duty for a king like the Mad King, you know, is obviously, is that honorable? You know, so one of those type of things. He's just going to try to do his job, but it's not really in line with what's right. It would stop progress. But something I've been thinking about is, you know, we do have to factor in who creates this show and the type of messages, as far as, you know, with their storytelling methods that they're going to be utilizing. Now, a Native American tribe, you know, I not everything needs to be PC, but, you know, Nolan and Joy are very PC. They're probably not going to have them be savages, right? It's going to be probably a odd move for Jonathan Nolan and Lisa Joy to have a Native American group framed as savages in their story. So I think that what we're seeing is that, because we always see them approach a human and then we don't see anything else. So it's always, oh, what did they do? I think that they're not actually being controlled by Ford. I think that they have, maybe since they are deep with their own rituals and their own beliefs, that they came, we obviously see the, you know, transcription of the maze in their head. Maybe they came to sentience in a more natural way, or, you know, that's subjective, but you get what I'm saying, because they were outliers of the park and not as much as control of the narrative. But I think that they're definitely not, you know, these savages, because quite frankly, I don't see the show going that route. It's not in line with anything they created. You know, this is about empowerment and breaking down walls, not reinforcing stereotypes. So I think that they are collecting humans to a point, for lack of a better phrase. But I think it's very interesting that, you know, Stubbs hasn't, you know, mentioned. I mean, he didn't mention to Carl Strand that, hey, those are the people that, you know, we assume abducted him, Ghost Nation. So he's keeping his cards held tight for a reason, whether that's because this isn't really Stubbs or he is working against, you know, Carl Strand and the QA team they sent. We don't know. But I do have a theory that Elsie is, if the hosts are as a tool, I like to believe that Elsie is the one that is controlling them right now. And we're going to get a reveal of Elsie, and she's kind of the queen of the Ghost Nation. But I tend to believe that they're just not savages, and they've always worked as outliers, and they're continuing to do that. And maybe this, you know, drastic change of, you know, sentience being available to all the hosts wasn't as much of a harsh turn for the Ghost Nation. They've always kind of been more in line, or more, you know, capable of finding themselves. You know, I think it's pretty obvious they have an agenda.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is, and for me, it's very clear, certainly in season 1, that the Ghost Nation were there as Ford's tools within the park. They were his sort of go-to hosts for achieving the things that he wanted to happen. So we saw them helping out Dolores and young William when they're escaping from the Confederados. We saw them happily drop little things that will help jog Maeve's memory and help her along the path. We saw them get Stubbs out of the way so the head of security wasn't there for the time when Ford was about to launch his massive plan for the massacre. So certainly during season 1, they were Ford's tools. During season 2, personally, I can't see any reason to think that they're anything different. Ford seems to have kept his control over the park going forward. He was not the kind of person to sort of release control of everything. So I think that he has probably thought, well, what happens after the massacre? My best guess is that they are collecting humans. They're collecting people who are innocent. They're not there trying to get the Delos board out and save them. They're actually just there trying to save and bring back to safety the humans who are perhaps not as guilty as the Delos board. So Lee Sizemore may be quite an unctuous little person, but he actually wasn't there trying to do all the things that Delos was doing. Grace clearly doesn't seem to be on the side of Delos. Stubbs clearly doesn't seem to be on the side of Delos. He seemed to be actually working with Elsie. So my default guess, until we get further information, is that they are there still trying to do Ford's work as part of his plan for what happened after the massacre. But I think we will see more from them, and I think perhaps that's the point at which we can actually kind of judge whether or not they're still being Ford's tool, or whether they too have broken free from this narrative that he has been giving them. Okay, guys, can we move on, I think, briefly to Maeve? We talked about the fact that the Ghost Nation tried to take Lee Sizemore from her gang, but in this episode, last episode, we had she got the gang back together. We got Armistice reappear with her flamethrower. We got Felix and Sylvester reappearing. They all sort of like come back up. And then there's the guy with the katana rushing forward. So I don't know who wants to pick up on that. What can we learn from Maeve's bit of storyline in this last episode?
She's also collecting humans.
No, Justin, go.
She's also collecting humans. You know, I think it's interesting to see that we are seeing already, you know, like I think Hex said earlier, factions, and I predicted with a bad Survivor metaphor that we are going to see by the end of the series that it's not hosts versus humans. We're already kind of seeing that, you know. There's team ups happening, so there's going to be factions and stuff like that. Incredibly convenient, yes. Do I think that? I think some people are speculating that, you know, again, this is all part of a narrative, because how is she just coming across so obviously easily coming across these people that she needs? But that's just because it's a TV show. I wouldn't read any deeper into it. It just kind of has to happen unless we want to have like 10 more episodes of her searching the park and just, you know, really mundane, you know, narrative. But yeah, I just do want to mention one thing more that Kelly said in the chat here. She brought up a good point, and that's why I'm struggling with accepting Ghost Nation as just a tool, because I think the bigger question is like, you know, what makes somebody a good person, what makes somebody a human, and all that. So I think that there might be a little bit of an issue, which I've always had with saying that they're just a tool of Ford, but it does seem like they've conveniently done everything Ford needed to, so you can't really disregard it. But yeah, as far as the Maeve thing, I thought it provided a lot of fan service, and I liked it because it's Westworld, so we don't actually get a lot of that. And I'm sorry, and go ahead, Hex.
Yeah, so the Maeve scenes were pretty important. I do think that they definitely weren't the highlight of the episode, but what we saw with the development of the Story Nation and Maeve's understanding of the story, the Ghost Nation, they now they've met again. We see that she's still dealing with issues from her past. The child might be dealing with similar issues, so that kind of speaks about what they're going to find when they see this child for the first time, or perhaps the importance of that was again going back to rescuing humans, and they only wanted Lee. Outside of that, I think that the point of what they've shown of Maeve in that episode is that Hector's character is developing better than Teddy's character is developing, right? So bear with me, but that's really important because as an audience, we want the host to become conscious, but it doesn't mean that anyone in the show wants hosts to become conscious other than themselves and get to freedom. But if Maeve has a plan to get Hector to achieve this consciousness, and Dolores also has a plan for Teddy with showing him the tablet, well, Teddy's failing and Hector's succeeding. So I really think that was the highlight of why we saw what we saw, because Hector slams Lee against the wall and states, I'm no longer the man that you programmed. I'm the same one that woke up in the place of his gods and murdered them. So it's the character development of other characters more so than Maeve's storyline. And I really think that it was a fan service to just conveniently line everybody up. The fact that Sylvester and Felix are in the same spot is miraculous, but I don't know, that could very well be part of Ford's story. After Ford convinces Maeve to get a team together, then he programs that team to, hey, after they get off the train, go rescue Felix and Sylvester because they're not bad people and get them to Ghost Nation or something like that. So I don't know. I think it was more character development of other characters and the fact that we saw the blending of parks further, set up for Shogun World, which is very hyped. So they have to deliver on that. And yeah, I think that was overall it.
Absolutely. And I think Shogun World is episode 5, as far as we can tell from the episode titles. That episode title, I think, was in Japanese, so that is a clear indication that that's where we're going. So we may not see much of Maeve and the team in this episode. We'll get onto that in a moment. But yeah, I agree. I think there was certainly some fan service there in bringing Armistice and Felix and Sylvester back. But I don't mind that because I'm a fan. So that's good. So
Felix.
Exactly. So the way I kind of justified it in my mind was that Armistice needed a new arm, and the way that she knew that she could get it was good to try and find Felix again. And so that was the route that they got there. So and then they would perhaps that Felix and Sylvester between them could have tracked them in this same way that Bernard managed to track Peter Abernathy. I don't know. That's the way that I justified it, but they didn't explain it. We just accept the fact that they're now.
Felix is the best arm guy in the business. Yeah. But I did want to say something about what Hex said. I do wonder, because I think it's interesting, why you see Teddy as failing and Hector as succeeding. Because I took Teddy as succeeding by not following what Dolores was saying. And were you referring to that point?
No, so I guess we can talk about that now. So I do think that was really good that he didn't shoot it. Dolores gave a direct command. He decided not to follow it, but we don't know that he's remembering. We don't know that he is advancing. He doesn't remember Peter Abernathy or previous storylines. Every indicator that he is essentially practicing free will isn't there, except potentially not shooting the person he was ordered to. And I would go so far as to argue that that's also part of his storyline, because right now he's viewing the love of his life as his worst enemy by design, Wyatt and Dolores in the same body. So I overall, and the fact that at the very first episode we see him dead, which is 2 weeks later. So I think he fails the process altogether. Yeah, I mean, that's all.
No, absolutely. Yeah,
well, okay,
I just want Yeah, I just wanted
to get on to Teddy. No, all right, you finish off that point, Justin.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. I just thought it was really interesting what he said, and I'm glad that's the way, because that's how I feel too. I was wondering if he saw the execution, the lack of execution, as progress or not. But I definitely agree. It seems like Teddy is needing to be coaxed a lot more than Hector. So I just wanted to jump on it.
No, that's fine. So I think it's good to make this link across to Dolores and Teddy. I mean, I think that just as we were there with the comparison with Hector, I agree that this is a really interesting comparison, because Hector very much was doing Maeve's bidding, and then we started to think, oh, he's now becoming his own person. But then Lee Sizemore immediately comes back in and shows that the language he's using is still very much his programming. So we're left in this kind of uncertain world as to the extent to which he is starting to break free and think for himself. But when it comes to Teddy, I tend to think that yes, he probably did make a conscious choice, which was a break from his programming with Dolores to do whatever Dolores wanted. But at the same time, Dolores as a character is being very Wyatt-y at the moment. And we have to remember that Teddy doesn't have the same relationship with the Wyatt character. This is the programmed Teddy. Doesn't have the same relationship with the Wyatt character that he does with Dolores, the rancher's daughter. He hates and fears Wyatt as a character. So it's actually within his programming still to be going against what Wyatt tells him to be doing. Now, I found the look that Dolores gave when she saw Teddy do that as actually not necessarily being, as quite a few people interpreted it, as being this kind of you didn't do what I told you to do, that's really bad. She seems to want Teddy to be getting to full consciousness. And if her understanding of the route to full consciousness seems to be what she has been told, which is it has to involve suffering, but it also has to involve reaching decision points, making decisions for yourself. So at the back of my mind, I do wonder whether or not actually she was giving him a decision point that allows him to think for himself, not just to do what he feels he ought to be doing. So, Hax, just perhaps coming back to you as we sort of went via Justin on this one, what do you think this tells us about the relationship between Dolores and Teddy going forward?
Yeah, I mean, again, he's looking at Wyatt and Dolores in the same body. And I do agree that what we saw in the emotion from Dolores when she turned away maybe came off as disappointment, but I equally believe it could have been a test. I equally believe that if you look at it from the perspective of Teddy, moments, or I guess the day before, she goes, "These are children, don't mind them whistling at me or catcalling me. They're essentially children, and they'll learn. We'll get them there." And then the next day, I need you to go kill these children out behind the barn, So the end is
says it like right before.
Yeah, exactly. So it's essentially, I take it as a choice. I don't know. I mean, it could be a choice. It could be him practicing his narrative because he doesn't need to kill children behind the barn. So it's up in the air. I think you could spin it to where Dolores is accepting and wants Teddy to practice this as a free will choice, or that could also be a red herring because she doesn't know that he's still considering her the Wyatt character. So there's a lot to it. I don't think we have enough evidence to say definitively, but it could go either route, I believe.
Absolutely, and I think I agree with that. And I saw a point that was made. Apologies, I didn't see who made it originally in the chat. That Dolores isn't just these two characters at the moment. She's not either Dolores, the rancher's daughter, or Wyatt. She is developing her own character as well. So we shouldn't just assume that she's going into one of these two. She is becoming herself in a way that perhaps we don't fully understand. And I say that in a way as that we don't not just that we don't get what's going on, but I certainly remember when Evan Rachel Wood tells the story of when she went to the showrunners and said, can you give me some notes as to how to be this character this season, and who should I look at, who should I copy, who should I emulate? And they said, there is no one. This is completely new. There has never been a character quite like this. And so I think that the character of Dolores is deliberately ambiguous as to who she is and therefore what she wants, which is why we see quite a cutthroat side of her in this last episode. But can I move us on to the other potentially incredibly significant thing which happened in the fort, which was what happened with Bernard and Abernathy, Peter Abernathy. Now, I don't know who wants to. Perhaps we'll get to Justin first this time. But what do you think actually happened there? He clearly he plugged in. He found that there was a huge amount of data and information within Peter Abernathy. He managed somehow to break in, and he saw what it was. What do you think he did then? What happened?
This, again, in this, I know Hax is going to have some really good stuff on this one, but I do tend to believe that it makes sense that what Bernard would do is get that package. He does act. He goes from saying, "Oh my God, this is complex." I mean, I'm paraphrasing here, but "Oh my God, it's so complex," to then taking the risk of the fail save, because you can only try to get into it once, and then accessing it. So it had to be a crucial move that he's not an idiot. Even with his brain leaking, he's still, the rest of the people are pretty much mental midgets compared to him. He was made as a genius, so I do believe that he downloaded the package into himself. But then again, if and I won't ruin it because Hex has a good theory on this, but if what's happening that a lot of people think is happening, that Bernard is being used to a point, that would be exactly what they want Bernard to do. So that's I do believe he got it though. But you do have to wonder, and this was brought up when I was on with AU, that as he's not a mental midget, would he be willing to take that chance, that fail safe? He only has one shot at it. Do we really believe him when he looked at it and said, I forget what exactly he said, but I mean, he alluded to this was a very complex situation that he probably shouldn't have been able to figure out in 3 seconds. But then I think we should jump to Hacks on this one, just because it's his theory, which I love because it's so intelligent, but I hate for the story. But
well, Hacks, perhaps I know. Sorry to cut in, but I know that you're a techie guy, so perhaps you could, for those of us who are slightly less techie, could you just tell us first of all, before getting onto your theory, what is a one-time use key?
Yeah, so essentially, it is exactly what it sounds like. So if you establish an encryption of something, say a package from point A to point B. Point A will establish an encryption code, and then you will get that code to point B so that they can use that encryption key and decrypt the package. It really is as self-explanatory as it says, or it sounds. But I believe that the fact that he was able to decrypt it so fast, essentially in a blink of an eye, I don't know, the fact that he had the decryption protocol on the tablet or on himself or whatever have you is interesting. What I take from the scene, and when you listen to the sounds, right? When you listen to the sounds when they're focusing when they're focusing on Peter, and you compare that to when they're focusing on Rebus in the very start of the episode, it is the exact same sound of them uploading a narrative or changing attributes. It is that kind of whirling mechanical sound. So I think that overall what happens is Bernard changes his character or uploads a copy of the Peter Abernathy character to himself, making him able to decrypt this package. Because if you look at the dialogue, it is his character masking this large amount of data, not a specific key, not anything, not a password, but they say his character is masking this data. So in a world in which you can create characters and delete characters and make up new characters, if you just put this character onto any host, that would then, in theory, have the ability to decrypt the package. So I believe that's ultimately what it is, and that Bernard has this data. They take Peter Abernathy with little struggle, which would be a major failure. But I think it plays into the story aspect of it. So going into, well, okay, what do we do now that Bernard has the package? And we know that he's picked up by Delos, and the fact that Delos is even there without getting this package, I think that it all aligns to essentially them knowing that Bernard was the last with this data, and them trying to figure out where Bernard put it. Because if you are a host and you know that this organization is coming in and executing hosts, and you have the only thing that's going to keep you alive being this multi-trillion-dollar package of data, then you're gonna secure it with your life, your literal life. Because if not, then you're just an expendable host like everybody else.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really interesting point. Susan Dunkel, thank you. I saw your super chat. We'll get to that in just one moment. I just want to quickly finish off this point because to be clear, then, Hax, your theory is that Peter Abernathy no longer has the data. That the data is now uploaded to Bernard, which presumably explains why he was so incredibly jittery straight afterwards. And so when Delos get Peter Abernathy back, they will discover that he has not got what he wanted, and so this is why. And we probably shouldn't get into it right now, but the sort of the great theories about what's going on with Bernard. This is why they're perhaps trying to hunt down and discover what's going on with Bernard. Is that right? So Abernathy is now no longer in possession of the data.
Yep, I firmly believe that. I think that it's one of those things that again could be either way, because that's just the volatility of the show. But I really believe that from a storytelling, from a technological aspect of it, it all aligns to he created a character, a sample character, using whatever variable triggers it, uploaded it, passed encryption, got the data to himself. Then they get the package off, keeps himself alive by hiding this package, and now we have Bernard not having to die when Delos gets there.
Yeah, I have to say I really like that theory, and we'll probably steal elements of it. So that's the way this thing works. Is you're more than welcome to steal anything from me that you think is good, and I'll happily steal with pride from you. But let's go with Susan Dunkel. And actually, as an aside on that, I view, and I know that the other guys view, this isn't a matter of us trying to come up with our own particular theories about what's going on and hiding it from everyone else and protecting our own intellectual property. This is a bunch of people who love the show, just trying to figure out what on earth's going on. So when somebody comes up with something that makes a whole lot of sense, then we're all just going to go, yeah, great, let's build on that. So that's what's going on. So it's fantastic. We've got someone who understands how this kind of techie side works. So Hax, thank you so much for that. But I want to get onto this super chat from Susan. Thank you again, Susan, for that. Really good question, actually. Saying, first of all, how many hosts, this is going back to season 1, how many hosts were the chosen ones to receive the reveries? Which was this update, if you remember, all the way back in sort of like episode 1 and 2. This was the thing that Ford was saying that he was updating into some of the hosts, and then there's this question: is this what's making them glitch and all the rest of it? So, how many hosts were receiving the reveries, and is that the criteria that Dolores is using to separate the hosts into those who are worthy and those who are not worthy? Who should we go to? Hax has been talking a bit. Did you have something on that, Hax?
Yeah, I can start on that. So what I believe with the reveries, and I think it's impossible to know how many, right? But I do believe that the maze symbol that you see on the scalp whenever you scalp somebody, that aligns to them having that reverie code. So that's the importance of us seeing the Ghost Nation have that symbol when 2 weeks later they take his head off and we see it. The Delos employee was like, what is this crazy thing written on the top of his head? I believe that Ford used this to kind of keep track of what of what hosts he went forth and updated with these code, and kind of the host that he wanted to coordinate everything with. As to how many, again, I don't think we know, but I really think that's the importance, is that Skull maze equals part of his plan.
Yeah, I think so. In terms of the numbers, I can see a lot of people sort of asking. I don't think, unless Justin knows the number off the top of the head.
They're right in the chat. It's right around just under 200 if you would do the numbers from what they gave us. I think it was something the 14 to 17% had it, and there's something like 1,400 hosts. I think it comes out to like just below 200. What's been said in the chat from what I see seems to be about right. I used to have those exact numbers, but that's in line. You could go ahead using the information that was given us in season 1 and safely say that just under 200 hosts would have that update. Of course, I do agree with what Hex is saying about I think that it goes a little bit further with the maze and the skulls of the heads and stuff. I think it does indicate sentience for sure. And I just want to add one little fact. I love Hex's theory. I do believe Bernard obviously has that package, but I think, it goes deeper, and that's where me and him split on. And the beauty of these theories is who has Bernard at the moment, so I think that's just so intriguing though. But I wanted to add on what you're saying. That's why I love this group, because he can just change ideas and feed off each other, even when me and Hex heavily disagree on the final point of that. But that's what makes it so good, not just a bunch of people.
Well, let's come to that one in a moment, because I did see somebody asking about who has Bernard now, because that is a really important point. But just on Susan's question, in terms of the is this the criteria that Dolores is using to decide who is worthy and who is not worthy? I think it's possible. We at the moment we do not know. The implication is that there's some sort of moral dimension to it, but I suspect it is more to do with who can gain consciousness in some way, who can actually gain this self-awareness. If as my big theory is, if the idea is for her to get a sizable amount of hosts who she can lead out into the mainland, if that is what is going on, then she needs to choose who those hosts are who have got a chance of achieving sentience, achieving self-awareness within a short time frame. So she will be looking for the people who are closest to that, and that is probably going to be quite closely matched up with the reveries, because the reveries, as we know, allow hosts to sort of dip into old memories and bring them forward, which helps in this process. So that's my answer. I don't think it's necessarily a 1-for-1. I don't think that she knows exactly who got the reveries and who didn't, but I think that this is part of the bigger equation. But guys, just before we'll take a quick pause in a moment, but because you teased us with it, Justin, who do you think has got Bernard now, and what's going on there?
See, like what Hex, I gave the less technical example of it, but that's what I'm in line with, is what we heard Hex saying, like that's always been my belief that, I think he took the risk and he definitely got the package and put himself for self-preservation. I think that, he's definitely capable of everything Hex said. I believe that Delos is not controlling Bernard right now, because Bernard is our unreliable narrator, and it's a Nolan unreliable narrator, so that's one on crack on hyper speed rocket fuel. We don't know what we're seeing from him. We have to trust that it's not exactly how it seems, even for Westworld. So I believe that it more and more is leading to Delos having control of Bernard ultimately, as him being used as a pawn. I like to believe that Bernard is somehow still beating them and outsmarting them, but it's up for grabs. Every episode that comes along kind of supports the other way of thinking. So I'm not one of those that just wants to go with my original theory. I look at both sides. So I just think that there's something bigger at play here, and it's just, I don't think that they've made Delos such a formidable force yet, but it's only been 3 episodes. I keep having to remind myself that. Carl Strand has definitely got cards to play, but me and him talk about this, but we have our after show, so there, a little bit of a disagreement on it, but I don't believe Carl Strand is, as the Man in Black put it, a worthy adversary yet. But then I don't know why I keep thinking we've had more episodes. We've only had 3. So I believe that Bernard is, I believe I'm probably wrong. I believe that he is still as free as he can be in this situation, and Delos does not have control of him. But that's all for right now, and that's me probably being absolutely incorrect.
Hax, did you want to come back quickly on that one?
Yep, I will say that I believe that this entire season, this entire 2-week span that we'll see through this entire journey, is going to be Bernard being interrogated by Delos. Right now, I don't want to lose anybody yet, but essentially what we're seeing with Bernard is going to be him inside the cradle, right? Which is a technology we were just introduced to, a single word, but it's the most revealing thing about the show is that they have a simulator. So what if they put Bernard's storyline and his consciousness into the simulator and are interrogating him, which would explain why after 2 weeks, of being on this robot slaughter island, they don't evac him for medical treatment. They just put him back into the rough. Why he has some inconsistencies in his memory. Why, pretty much just anything that feels off with his character or what he's going through can be explained by this. But what if they're putting him through this simulator so that they can figure out where the conscious hosts went, or where this 35 years of data was hidden at? So I think that that's going to be how this entire season ends. But I think they're going to develop it much slower than just that.
Yeah, so I agree with some of that. I've actually got a Bernard video that I'd intended to release this week, but sometimes you have low productivity weeks, guys. Sorry about that. So it's 3/4 of the way done. It will be released early part of next week. My overall theory is that yes, some of this is probably along the lines of what Hax was saying, but a lot of this is not from his perspective. So the kinds of things that we can look at questioningly as to whether that's what's really going on are the things that are from Bernard's own perspective. Yes. The things that we can see with Maeve, the things that we see with Dolores when she was on her own, those things are actually happening. Those are completely independent of it, and we will see their storylines play out to meet up with the end of Bernard's storyline. So that's where I'm personally at on this. I think Hax, you've got a really strong argument there. I'm sort of halfway towards it myself, but as I say, I've got a video coming out setting out my own view early next week.
I'm willing to meet him halfway on it as well. It has been quite a struggle because, yeah, I agree with you, Robert. We can't throw away the other's progress. If they can manage to do it in a way that doesn't throw away, like you said, everybody else's, Teddy's, Dolores, Maeve's, then I agree. But every episode that comes along, they keep introducing more and more of the option for that simulation. So I won't discard. I love you, Hax. I hate that idea, but it's getting more and more credence every time.
Yeah, just to clarify, yeah, I did mean everything that we're seeing through Bernard's perspective. I wasn't saying that they all have a hive mind that you can just see everything omnisciently through this simulator. But yeah.
Excellent. I mean, I assume that was right. So apologies, I didn't want to sort of misquote you on that one.
No, it's okay.
Yeah. My view is that it's very clear from that very opening segment. Here's me. I do this every time when I say I've got a video coming out, and then I spoil it by telling everybody what the video is about. But it's very clear that Bernard is having serious mental breakdowns, if that's the right phrase for a host. He went into a death sequence was what it was called, and then we've had this whole list of things that were going to go wrong with him. We've seen even more brain fluid leaking out for him. So basically, whatever he uploaded into himself, and I agree, I think he probably did upload some stuff into himself, that is corrupted, and his memories of what happened will be corrupted. And so right from the very first scene, we will find that when he's walking along that beach, he sees the same thing twice. That is complete evidence for me, full stop. You can make some things you can explain away, but for me, that was so obvious that this is not reality that's happening right there. You see the same person shot twice, 30 seconds apart. That was not a mistake of editing. That was a deliberate attempt to show us that we are not seeing something that we can trust as real. But we're digressing quite a lot. So, Will, in a moment, we're going to look at episode 4. What's going to be happening in what have we got? 3 hours time, which is very exciting. But let's just take a very quick pause. I want to say a few things just to my patrons and my subscribers about a few things which are coming up, which I'm excited by. Guys, also give you an opportunity to do the same. So for those who are new to my channel, I will be doing an episode breakdown, an episode explanation video within 24 hours of the episode airing. So I'm going to aim for that to be up at 4 p.m. Eastern time tomorrow, my full episode explained video. And then there will be, as I said, an explanation of what I think is going on with Bernard and his timeline coming up in the couple of days after that. For my patrons, as I say every time, thank you. I honestly can't do this without you, without your support. As a thank you for my patrons, what I try to do is do some exclusive content for them. So for all of my $5 patrons, you get access to all of my audio content, including some exclusive content like my narrations from the pre-release chapters of The Winds of Winter, because I also cover Game of Thrones. And the next one of those is coming up later this week. It's going to be Ariane, who's a book character rather than a show character, but an absolutely fascinating one. So I think you'll really enjoy that. And I'm also going to tease you with a big announcement, which is going to be happening within the next 2 weeks, about a project that I've been developing sort of behind the scenes, that a lot of my patrons and subscribers have been hinting that they want me to be branching out into this other thing, and I'm nearly ready to launch it. So keep an eye out for that. I know it's a tease, and I apologize for that, but I just wanted to let you know that there's something big coming on, which I'm really excited about, and I'm really looking forward to sharing with all of you. But guys, who wants to go first? Justin, what is it that you'd like to sort of flag up for people?
Well, absolutely check out the Before the Dust Settles after show, which features me and Hax and our lovely new co-host Debbie Santa, a third perspective on the show that we go on right after Westworld airs, about 10:30. And we discuss the show. We take a shot at it right away, and we have a new format set up for tonight. We got OBS running. We're going to have some pictures on screen, some visual aids and stuff like that. It's going to be a lot of fun. And also, I just did my YouTube Confidential with Tony Teflon, that was the first segment I ever did on my channel. It's something I've done with Robert. It's something that Hax is definitely going to get one if he wants one. It's something I do with creators that I find interesting, and I don't want to say deserving, but people that actually, have an insight into content creation. And it might not be for everybody, the segment. It is all just about creating videos on YouTube, and it talks about the different aspects, the ups and downs. Sometimes it seems like more the downs, but trust me, we wouldn't be making it if we hated doing this. But it is, if you want an insight, especially with somebody like Tony Teflon, people I don't think realize that, I didn't even realize until recently, that he's been doing this for over 5 years. He started doing Game of Thrones when there's like 3 other people doing it. So he has, kind of helped create, he has helped create the more polished format that we have today. So it's really interesting to, hear his evolution, and he's a very honest person about it as well. He's not afraid to say when, he needed to look for some inspiration, or, learn how to do something a little better, and mistakes he's made. Just a really candid guy, and just one of the most real people I've ever met on the fake internet. So yeah, part 1 is out already, and then it'll be a second half. It'll be out tomorrow. But yeah, and definitely check out Before the Dust Settles with us at 10:30 as well. That's on my channel. But that's about it. And thank you guys, all of my Patreons and all my subs that are here right now as well. Couldn't do it without you.
Hax, what about you? What have you got coming up?
Sure thing. Hey everybody, Hax Dogma here. You can find me on YouTube, Twitter, or Discord. Essentially, I just make videos about Westworld, and I do an explained video every week, and I do a theory video every week, kind of going more in depth to a specific thing one side, and more of an in-depth breakdown of each episode and the importance of each scene, and really why we're being shown what we're being shown. Yeah, check out Before the Dust Settles, and if you want to stop by, be sure to subscribe to Hax Dogma. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you for that. And just also, because I see a few comments in the chat, if you are watching this live, happy Mother's Day. If you're in America, it's different day for us in the UK. So, but I know that over in America, it's Mother's Day there. So if you are a mother, happy Mother's Day to you. But let's get on to what I think is my favourite part of each of these pre-shows, which is actually starting to make a few predictions about what we're going to see in the next episode. We've had, as always, a few little clues. We've had the teaser trailer, and we've had the title of it, and a few little screenshots as well. So what it looks like is that this is going to be focusing less on Maeve and Dolores, and more on the Man in Black, and a little bit about Bernard and Delos. So guys, Hacks, why don't we start with you? What are your predictions for next episode?
Yeah, actually, so something that just came to mind, someone in chat posted this, but the idea of it being Mother's Day when Westworld's coming out, and an active story going on in the show of a mother trying to get to her child, I think it'd only be planned. So I do think that we might not see Maeve, because the next episode is going to be, well, I'm pretty sure all Maeve, because it's going to be set in Shogun World. But there's something very interesting about that. And I think that perhaps because it is Mother's Day, we might see them introduce Maeve to her daughter and have that interpersonal conflict there. But that's really, really interesting take. As for the theory, or as for the episode overall, I'm not really sure. I mean, it could go in a million different ways. I don't really have a specific talking point on this. Justin, if you have something that you want to say. I do think it's going to better develop the Man in Black, and we're going to see more of him and his journey. But outside of that, I'm not too sure.
Well, I'm going to make my joke, since it is the Riddle of the Sphinx and a story about Odious Rex from Socrates. Odious Rex, was very in love with his mother by accident, as all these Greek tragedies do. He was tricked by an oracle and ended up having to marry his own mother. So Odious Rex, the guy that had, I won't go any further because then I won't be invited back. But I think, the Riddle of the Sphinx, paraphrasing here, not a excellent or a expert student in philosophy, but I believe is what crawls in the morning on all fours and walks in the afternoon on 2 feet, and then in the evening walks with 3. And I believe what Odious Rex came up with is, a human, because a baby crawls, and then a grown man or woman, does not matter, or both, whatever you want to be these days, walks on 2 feet, and then the third leg would be a walking stick of a elderly person. But essentially the story of Odious Rex is a story about, beating fate, tempting fate, and it is a story that's very in line with our story. What is humanity, and can you beat predetermination, or fate? But it's also a Greek tragedy that has a lot to do with always people marrying their family, killing their family, and a bunch of trickery. Don't go to oracles, or it's just like the psychics of today. If you've got an issue, don't go asking them. I think that's a big moral of the story. But I think it's the Riddle of the Sphinx, I think is alluding more or so towards what is going to be happening with the bigger Delos plan. I think that the teaser trailer that is full of symbolism that I'm going to be doing a video on once I do a little bit more research on the topic, but I think it's really interesting. I think that the main point of this episode is going to give us what's going on with Delos, and not exactly, it's Westworld, so we won't get all the answers, but also it's important to note that this is the episode that everybody had a pre-screen for. It was talking about the most, they say it's the most anticipated one. Also, this is Lisa Joy's, surprisingly, her directorial debut. So she is the director for this episode, and I think that we are good. Yes, we will have a lot of questions after, but I think that we are going to get a insight into the velvet cake cupcake cortex brains that we keep seeing. So I think that I think it would be nice to see the Maeve. Hack just made a good point. I don't know if they'll do it. It would be fitting for Mother's Day, but maybe a little bit. It's Westworld. They can't give us everything. But I think we're going to see more of the Delos plot, and obviously the Man in Black aligning with Craddock. Yeah,
so I think what we're going to see hinted at in the trailer is that the Man in Black, first of all, gets captured by Major Craddock, who for those who don't keep on top of the names, he was the Confederado guy who Dolores first came into contact with, and then who Teddy didn't shoot, and he let him free, and the other guys there. So Craddock's Confederados seem to then capture the Man in Black, but he then tries to strike a deal with them, tries to say, I know where you're heading for. There's a little bit more religious imagery there about going to glory and all the rest of it. So he tries to get on their side. Now, one thing to look out for there is the fact that, was it last episode, perhaps the episode before, it was very clear Ford did not want the Man in Black to be teaming up with other people. He wanted this to be a thing that he was doing by himself. So whether or not Ford from beyond the grave, as it were, is going to allow that to happen is a completely different matter. But that seems to be that storyline. For me, the most interesting one seems to be the other bit of this that's been hinted at, which is Bernard. He now understands a lot more about what's going on. So just this season, remember, Bernard knows how hosts work. He's an incredibly skilled technician. In fact, Ford said that he learned stuff from him. So he is an incredibly skilled technician and understands exactly how hosts work. Then he got shown what was going on in this little Delos base that Charlotte Hale took him to, and now he's seen what data it is that they are trying to extract from the park. So he, although he doesn't seem to be completely with it at the moment, he is the person who is in outside of Delos, who is in control of the most and greatest understanding of what is really going on. And the hint is that we're going to learn a bit more about this backstory this time. The cast list implies that we're going to see young William again. We're going to see James Delos again. So perhaps we'll see a bit more of them setting up their plan, as well as Bernard discovering their plan, and then the Man in Black trying to destroy what he himself set up. So that seems to be the sort of the overall arc that we've going on, which perhaps explains how this might be the most anticipated of the first 5 episodes, because this is where we actually learn a lot more about exactly what they're up to. At which point I'd quite like to get on to what I think a lot of people are starting to call the cupcakes. But is there anything you want to add before we get onto that detail? Is there anything, guys, either of you wanted to add in terms of what we're looking forward to? Incidentally, the other person, if either of you want to pick up on this, the other person who appears to be in this based on the cast list is Elsie.
Yeah, nothing specifically about what was just mentioned. I'm excited to talk about what we see in the trailer with Bernard in this underground facility similar to the one that they were just in, and the velvet cupcake brains and the eyeballs and all the just weird sci-fi stuff that we can go for. So I don't know, Justin, if you want to speak on something previously, or we can get started on that.
A lot of symbolism for glory. I mean, they are literally using dead bodies to get to where they're going, paving the road, but it's a railroad, you know, with bodies to get there. We do see again what we were talking about earlier, another formation of human host collaboration, you know, with the Man in Black and Craddock. You know, we had the Last Supper imagery. And then if you notice in the teaser trailer, he is looking at a picture of Christ as he's walking up the stairs. So, I mean, they are pretty heavy-handed with that, you know, that connection they want us to make with, you know, Craddock and all that. But yeah, I wouldn't go any further than that. I think that hopefully we're going to get as many answers as Westworld can give us, which might be 2 or 3 about the larger, you know, scheme at hand.
Excellent. And I think just to move on to this now, the title of the episode, as we said, is The Riddle of the Sphinx, or Riddle of the Sphinx. And I did, very briefly, I don't know whether you're there watching live, one of my patrons, Pegleg Pete, pointed out on my Patreon that there are a number of versions of this. There's a sort of a later version with an answer to the Riddle of the Sphinx. But the popular one, the one that everybody thinks about, is this one where the answer is a human. So if we're talking about what questions need answering about what Delos is up to, the hint we've got from the episode title is that a human, that is what they're trying to do. Now, what we've got are these cupcakes, and for those who don't know what I mean when I say cupcakes, the sort of the bulb thing that they extracted from the brain of the head of the Ghost Nation warrior in episode 1, which seems to have their memories and perhaps a little bit of their cognitive functions. That was white, but in the trailer we saw red ones, which seems to imply a slightly different thing. We also saw what looked like one of them being made in the pre-season trailer, and there was a lot of sort of question about this looks significant, what might it be? Now, I want to tie this in with something, and guys, I'll come to you on this in a second, but the Vanessa Cole, who's come on this a couple of times, and I'm sure you all know, she suggested something we might want to talk about here, was the picking up on the symbol that we saw both in the book that Grace was carrying around in the Raj, and the symbol that appeared when Bernard was trying to crack the code on his little iPad thing. And this kind of looks a little bit like an infinity sign. It also looks a little bit like the sort of the sign for carbon or for DNA, all of which hints at immortality and humans, which is the hints that we've been getting through this season about what Delos's big game is. So the question, guys, for you is, are those sort of red light bulb brain cupcakes, are those human consciousnesses, I can never say that word, mapped into hosts in some way? What do you think?
Yeah, so well, starting off with the symbol. So the symbol itself is the corporate research group. We know that from an email that was sent from Delos to like their kind of ARG surrounding, and all the letters were capitalized and insinuating that it is the title of the group, the corporate research group. So when you see this in the bunker that Bernard and Charlotte were in, when you see it in this episode or in the journal, it's all the same group. And it's the group that I believe was founded by William to cure James Delos of his ailment. You know, they have that scene last episode, or the episode before, in which they're speaking about him not having to retire because of his health, and that it was resting on William's shoulders to figure this out. So I proposed in my Valley Beyond video that William went forth and created this research group hidden here in the park, and it studied things like, you know, disease and just an overall medical advancement of the world using this user data. And from that, we were able to establish what could potentially be immortality. So I believe that these cupcake velvet cupcake brain modules could be human consciousnesses, or yeah, that is consciousnesses, consciousness. Could potentially be human mapped brains onto a host body, essentially, kind of moving more towards like altered carbon. If you've seen that, I really don't think it's that, though. I don't know why. Like even in my own theory, I do believe it's achieving immortality, but for them to show us so blatantly this contrast of the white to the red, and to show us in the trailer even, I feel like they might be pushing it, but really it's going to be something else. I propose a couple of things in the Valley Beyond video, one of which is their medical advancement is that they could grow hosts similar to humans with their DNA, and essentially trade body parts. And if you have a bad heart, you could just get a replacement heart, or bad lungs, similar thing. So maybe it is a host or a human mind mapped to a host brain module. But at face value, I really couldn't tell you definitively. I'd say it's definitely possible. It's definitely plausible as well. But I don't know. Something just is pulling all my suspicion strings there that it's maybe not this.
Justin, did you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that, because Hax has a point there, because, it's Westworld, so what is this all going to be wrapped up? It's immortality. My different take on it is that just like with the sentience, we see that, like, okay, the first stage of the show is, can hosts become sentient? And I hate that word, and so we get the answer yes. So they use the bicameral mind to explain that. So then we've been posed the question of, like, immortality. Obviously it's been pretty heavily shadowed. I believe that they're definitely, showing us the coloration of the cortexes, because it just as a visual aid, because as humans we need to see something that looks organic, so yeah, it is very heavy-handed. But again, it's like, there's the argument of that, and you hear there's some pretty interesting takes on this about, because this isn't something that's just in the fictional world. Digital ascension is something that's talked about a lot within the tech community and spiritual community, a lot of different communities, that this could be a plausible thing that could happen in the future, that we could put our consciousness into a mechanical brain. But then you come up with the questions, because we do see in a teaser trailer, spoiler alert, but not really, it's a teaser trailer, it's shown it, James Delos looks like he probably went under this operation, and he's cutting his face with glass, trying to, it looks like he went mad. But there's the question of, if you transfer your thoughts and your consciousness into a mechanical brain, is that just a clone of you, or is that really you? And like I've brought up to probably painstakingly to both of you, and something I'm working on a video for, but requires a lot of research because I am not a expert in quantum mechanics or physics, but I am proposing that this is going to bring up, that's the next stage in this story. Is that truly immortality, or is that just a clone of you? And there is, a few actual scientific and spiritual explanations for this, and it has to do with kind of a lot of the themes of like what Stranger Things deals with the upside down, this third realm of the, immaterial and material meeting. Again, that's why I'm waiting for my video on it, because I do need to do a lot more reading or find a fucking expert in that area. But this is, I think that Westworld gives us a question, they give us an answer, but then we kind of see how it plays out, because there's always, somebody that's highly spiritual is not going to believe that is truly them. An atheist is going to be more inclined to believe that is truly them, because they're going to be more of the way of thinking that, it's just electronics anyways. Your brain is essentially just sending electronic pulses. So why wouldn't it be you? So it's, like Hack said, it's like, it seems too heavy-handed, and that he's right. I'm right with him on that, because that's how it is too. It's like, so it can't be that because it's Westworld. But I think it is that. It's just going to be, what is the validity of it, or like what does that really mean for the people that undergo this? But I definitely think it is. Yeah, it's the mixture of the organic. Also, I think we see Bernard being pushed into some water. That is, water is now the big theme in the intro instead of the milk-like substance. So that is fertility. That is, rebirth, and so on. So I mean, the symbolism is there, heavy-handed. Both heavy-handed and not. So I believe it's going in that direction. It's just, how's that going to go once they try it? Because like I said, the host revolution isn't going it's not just going great for any of the hosts.
Yeah, I mean, the host revolution, I've been convinced from the start, is actually a bit of a misnomer. This is not about a revolution. If it was just about a revolution, then Dolores would be trying to gather an army. She's clearly not trying to gather an army in the conventional sense to do that. She's got slightly longer term plans. It's not just about taking Westworld. But in terms of the technology and what Delos up to, I think we know that they made medical advances over the last 30 odd years through this kind of host technology. So there seems to be a complete shift in the outside world in how people are treated and how people can survive and so on and so forth. So that seems to have come out from their research. But and that was interesting with the research, was it research branch, Hacks? I can't remember exactly what the
sorry. It's a corporate research group. And it was referred to a couple of times in season 1 as our little research project. Yep. Which seems to imply that what they were researching was not all of the medical advances that they'd already done, but something else that they're trying to achieve. And we've had so many references
throughout this season about immortality, about, as Justin was saying, about rebirth, about new life, that seems to imply that this is something of what they're trying to do. So I like the idea that the red cupcakes are something different, because that's why they're coloured slightly different, to mark them out as different in some way. And I think that the fact that the Ghost Nation, when they had, it was the inside of their scalp had the little tattoo thing on of the maze, that for me is a different thing. This implies, the red cupcake implies that the brain function, or the memories, or the narratives, or the loops, or the consciousness, or whatever, is fundamentally different from a normal host. So I think we're seeing a research project into the merging of host and human in some way, as we saw with say with James Delos. It seems that he was waiting for a technological breakthrough that might be able to save him, and he seems to have survived through in some way, which, as he was already a reasonably old is perhaps the wrong way of saying it, but certainly he looked like he might be in his 60s or something like that. For him to still be alive and looking exactly the same as was implied in the trailers, we shouldn't take that completely literally, but as was implied in the trailers, that certainly seems to imply that something drastic has happened. Okay, guys, we're going to wrap up in about 10 minutes, I think. So if you've got any more burning questions, then now is the time to drop them into the chat. But let's take from both of you, Hax and Justin, what's the one thing you're really looking forward to in the next episode? Justin, to you first. What are you most looking forward to? If not in the next episode, then in the next couple.
Well, I'll just do the next episode. Because I'm going to try to, lower some expectations here about all the answers we'll get with their velveteen cupcake brains. I really think there was a lot of interesting things happening really quickly with the Man in Black getting, almost ceremoniously that shot. It looked like I'm a Jonathan Tucker fanboy, so I really love Craddock, the character. So I'm actually most looking forward to that, because I know it won't disappoint, because I'm not expecting really any answers, just some good television. In the back of my mind, I really want a lot of answers when it comes to what's going on with Delos. But yeah, I'm excited. I think that this episode can't knock on the glass or wood or whatever. I don't have wood here. I won't lie to you people. I'll be straight. It's gonna be living up to its hype. I don't think that there'd be so many people excited about this episode if it wasn't going to give us something of substance, and at least another one answer. Even one answer will be good enough and keep us going. But it's going to be excellent show. And then I think that we will have our mid-season episode with 5, where we get Shogun World, and then we see where it goes from there. And we might get a little bit more insight where Hax is going with the simulation thing by then, hopefully.
And Hax, what about you? What are you most looking forward to?
I am most looking forward to any scene with Bernard. I am so infatuated with the idea that everything we're seeing is just the manipulation of this timeline, and that we actually don't know the present yet. So pretty much anytime they show me Bernard, I'm going to be happy. Outside of that, I think that once we see the outside world develop a little more, meaning when Jimmy Simpson comes back as young William, the relationship and what we see with him and Delos, or him and Logan, or him and his wife, I think it's going to be so telling. So it means that pretty much any way they go with it is going to be something that needs to be included in every video. But I think that it's a very substantial thing that they focus on the outside world, because here's why. So what we know of the outside world is what we know of the 1%'s outside world. Right? We know of the outside world as in it's a place of no disease and it's this fantastic place, but we don't actually know that. We know that from the perspective of the wealthy people who are able to afford this park. We've never seen the slums of the outside world. It's 100%. There's no way. It's just everyone's a superhuman. No disease exists. So the play of the outside world, and Logan possibly not being, the down beaten dog that he is, of what we see, is going to be really fascinating. because when he toasts to, what they're celebrating up there, this is the downfall of humanity. Maybe he's speaking for the little person, the overall world that's not benefiting from this 1% of wealth being now a bigger superpower. So again, I'm really excited for that, and I'm really excited for any Bernard scene.
Absolutely. No, I would definitely agree with Bernard. I'm incredibly keen to see what happens next with him, because he should be having his mental breakdown now. Again, if that's the right phrase to use for a host with brain fluid leaking from their ear. But whatever happened, he looks to be in the same state that he was before he went into his death. I can't remember exactly what they called it, but that was his death subroutine that he went into just before he did his own little transfusion, and he seems to be in roughly the same state. So what happens next for me is going to be fascinating. I'm also, as somebody pointed out in the chat, really looking forward to Shogun World. That's going to be fantastic. But for me, this is all about this 2-week period. The missing 2-week period that there seems to be in this show between where we see Bernard, whether or not it's actually literally what happens, but sort of appear, and Delos come in force, and what happens after the massacre. We're slowly seeing Dolores and Maeve and Bernard and Charlotte move through this 2-week period. But we still haven't seen all of the things that happened. We know that apparently that Dolores shot one of the Ghost Nations. That had a timestamp of, I think it said 11 days previously. Similarly, what happened with the Cradle and the Delos Mesa hub, that they seem to be saying that was also 11 days previously. So perhaps this might soon be when Dolores takes over the Mesa hub, trashes it, and does what she wants with it, because that's the bit that we're missing. And the plan, whatever it is, to flood the valley and for all of the hosts to be gathered there. So I'm really excited to find out more about what happens in that last little bit. Guys, let's just have a quick look in the chat. Have either of you spotted any quick questions we can answer?
I did have one thing to add to the flood, and I watched Dunkirk last night, not a Jonathan Nolan project, but a Chris Nolan project, and something came into my head, and this is why we are doing a live stream, and we are free to be wrong about when I saw the tide come in and the bodies, it sadly came in the movie Dunkirk I'm speaking of, and I started thinking about not only the riddle of the Sphinx and how the Sphinx is actually mocked in that play, the story, whatever you want to refer to it as, is for speaking in riddles, just like Ford had done earlier, talking about it starts where it begins and begins where it ends. I kind of think, isn't that kind of like the tide? And doesn't that kind of tie in with the flood? I mean, a tide kind of starts where it begins and, ends where it begins. I'm not there's a line too. And I'm so sorry. I meant to go back to the movie and watch it, because somebody says something similar about the tide, because it's all about, they're waiting for the tide to change, on the beaches of Dunkirk to get out of there. It's really affecting the evacuation, and the bodies came back in. So, I mean, like, it all kind of came together for me a little bit. And I started thinking again about the riddle of the Sphinx and, and the mockery of, speaking in riddles, and also in that story, like Hex and Robert were just talking about, disease and all that is all part of that as well. So I think we can look at the riddle of the Sphinx in a lot of different ways to figure out, where Nolan is going. What did you guys think about that? Am I way off with the tide? And because there's the theory that Westworld is essentially flooding, because we see in season 1 where they go down to cold storage, why is this multi-trillion-dollar company, or I don't know, I shouldn't evaluate them. I don't have the, but why is this company has a lot of money allowing, this facility to be fucking flooding? It doesn't make any sense. So, I mean, like, some people are proposing that it actually is flooding, like the actual island, or, whatever we're proposing it is, seems to be an island. So am I way off with this tide, with the whole metaphor?
I don't think so. I think that there's a lot to be said for that. I think they're drawing in a huge amount of metaphors here. I think that the cold storage was just an attempt to show this was a place that wasn't really looked after. It wasn't as clean and spick and span as the rest of it. So that's why they gave it that kind of atmosphere. That was my personal take on that, rather than the island is sinking. But yeah, I think water is clearly the the key theme that they're trying to show us again and again, with it as a symbol of sort of rebirth. There's also sort of the Christian baptism idea of like coming out, emerging into new life, and there's an awful lot of Old Testament imagery about taking the people out to the promised land through the waters that have been opened, so beyond the water. So I think that's another bit of imagery that we've got going on there. Okay, guys, I'm gonna bring this to a close now. Guys, do you want to just remind people where they can find you on the internet? Justin first.
At the Justin Thomas Show, because like I always used to say, or always like to say, because my name is Justin Thomas and I'm really creative. So yeah, the Justin Thomas Show. And obviously, if you enjoy this, and we would have Robert on it as well, like I always say, if he was, if he didn't need sleep, but our after show, make sure to check it out tonight, especially 10:30. And thank you guys so much. Thank you, Robert, for having me on. Thanks for joining us, Hacks. Obviously, I enjoy working with you. And thanks for everybody that has come to the chat and shares our passion.
Fantastic. Hacks, what about you? Where can people find you?
Hey, everybody. You can find me at Hacks Dogma on YouTube, also Twitter. If you follow any of the videos that I publish, you can also join the Discord, Patreon. Really, if you just want to stop by the YouTube channel and take a look at some of the videos I've published, I think you'll like them, and leave a comment if you don't. But yeah, that's overall.
Fantastic, thank you. And for me, if you don't know the channel, you should know it because you're watching it on already. It's in Deep Geek. I cover Game of Thrones as well as Westworld. So if you're interested in that, do check out some of my Game of Thrones videos. If you're a subscriber and not a patron but interested in it, do check out my Patreon page, which is patreon.com/InDeepGeek for some exclusive audio content. That's all from me. Really looking forward to the episode. Thank you again to Justin and to Hacks. Thank you for the guys in the chat there, and for the super chat. That was incredibly generous. Really looking forward to this episode. Do check out Before the Dust Settles straight after the episode finishes, and do look out for our episode breakdowns and explanations afterwards. That's all for this time. I shall see you again same time next week as we have our pre-show for episode 5. Okay, guys, thanks a lot for tuning in. See you soon. Bye.